Joining me now via Skype is the Group Chief Operating Officer of Nest Oil Group, Eloka Umeh, to discuss all these matters. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now,
Good to be here.
Let's start off this conversation with your thoughts on the power sector since privatization. Now, it's more than 6 years, and now calls are intensifying for reforms to address recurring issues that still plague the generation, transmission, and distribution of power.
Thank you for that question. We've been talking about this for many years, and over several years now, starting from about 2011, we've always said we're going to have 10,000 megawatts being produced in the country. And whenever I said, we're going to do it next year. But I've always said it's not going to happen. And this is very simple. The reason is very simple. And you mentioned some of the reasons already. The entire value chain is broken. Now think about Nigeria. We produce about 81% of the entire grid power that we generate in this country from thermal means, primarily natural gas. The remaining 19% or thereabouts is from hydro. Now, if we focus only on natural gas, for example, you mentioned it while you were giving the news update. If you are a gas, Nigeria really is a gas producing country. We should be producing way more gas than we are doing today. So think about this. We're not producing enough gas to begin with. We don't have enough gas pipelines in the country. The GenCos are not really working right. The transmission lines are insufficient to wheel the power that we can produce here. And then, of course, distribution is a problem. So all the things I just read, see the energy flow starting from the gas producer to gas transporter to generation, transmission, and then distribution. And then the money is collected by the discos and sent back to pay everybody along the value chain. The entire thing is broken. And as long as it remains broken, the power sector can never work. Now, the government did the right thing by privatizing the industry. However, part of privatization has failed simply because several things haven't worked. We keep changing the regulations. The MITO is stifling the discos from doing what they need to do. Some of the basic infrastructure we're still supposed to build, transmission lines, gas pipelines, and so on and so forth, are not there. The regulations we have today, some of them are good, can actually work, but some need to be drastically changed. And also, the government needs to see private companies as a key partner to making this industry work. Unless this happens, we will never get beyond the doldrums that we're seeing right now.
Worrisome. We've had huge gaps in terms of infrastructure. You've identified that too, and investments. Now let's take a look at reports of discos not distributing thousands of megawatts of power. This remains worrisome, and we see this blame game all over every part of the chain, trying to maintain his or her own position.
So if you think about distribution, let's stay on distribution for a second. If you talk to the average Nigerian or the average Nigerian in the regulators, they'll tell you we have about 7 million or 8 million customers, right? That's who they identify. Now, let's assume, for example, that's correct. 8 million customers that the discos have. Of those 8 million customers, about half of them have meters. Out of the half that have meters, half of the ones that have meters, their meters are obsolete. How can you ever collect your money? Now, there's been some new regulations that have come into play, like the MAP, Meter Asset Provider, and allowing meter providers the third-party meter providers to supply these meters. That's a good thing. However, for us to really get the discos working, a significant investment needs to be made in metering the entire country. And there's not just Nigeria doing this. Many other countries are doing the same thing. Other countries that have reasonably steady power, they're all doing this. They're doing massive metering. But now, within the MITO, there is a limit to how much the discos can invest in metering. Now, they have to invest in metering. They have to invest in upgrading the infrastructure, the power lines, the transformers, and other infrastructure within their network. The MITO does not allow them to make this investment. Beyond that, they need to go raise the money to make this investment. And private investors, not just from Nigeria, but overseas, who want to put in money, who have the money to put in, look at our system. And they say, this is not workable. We don't have a bankable system. We also have our rule of law in this country is very suspect. You know, we sign an agreement with a private investor, they bring in their money, and down the line, they start having problems with the agreement that was signed. Yeah. So if there's no sanctity of agreements that are signed, people will not have the courage or the confidence to invest the money because they don't know if they're going to get their money back. So the government needs to help. I mean, the government is trying to help, but they need to do more and do it quicker to help make these things work. Our regulations need to be stable. We need to pick a set of regulations and stick with them, right? We also need to make sure that the rule of law applies. If you put your money in this country and you sign agreements, those agreements must be honored. No matter who is in government, they must be honored. And then some of the regulations that we have today, like the MITO, you need to break those open because some of them don't work. That's the reality that we're facing. So the will is there, the money is there. However, some of the things that we put in place are not working. And I always say, anytime people ask me this, I say to them, you cannot regulate a market into existence. We are over-regulating the power industry. You need to loosen those regulations a little bit. Let the private companies do what they need to know, what they know how to do, which is do business with each other. The discos need to be able to talk to the gencos. Gencos need to be able to deal with the gas supplier, and it needs to be on a willing buyer, willing seller type of framework. Whatever you need to pay to get the product, pay it. This is why the cell phones are working today. If we were regulating the telecoms industry the way we're regulating the power industry, it would never have worked.
Sounds very interesting.
We need to take a different look at this sector.
Very importantly, there when you talk about regulations, now at state levels, what's your expectations with regards to on-grid and off-grid populace? Now, there are growing calls for states to also explore alternative energy sources. We're still largely driven by hydropower. Like you said, the willing buyer, willing seller thing. I know some markets in the country operate that now. We have Sura Market in Lagos, Aria Market, I think in Onitsha, and even Kano, we have the Sabongeri Market also running via that scheme. What do you make of all of this?
So let me put it this way. If you want states to get involved, my question is, what would the state be doing? The state should be there to provide a conducive playing field for private investors to bring in their money. So if you ask me, I'll say, for example, state, hang on, don't put money, we don't need your money. What we need, I'm a power producer or a potential power producer. What we need is for you to, number one, if I need land, provide the land. I'm going to pay for it, but don't make getting permits difficult. If we need right of way to run a transmission line, that's where you can step in to help. So this right of way can be provided, and so on and so forth. However, I think what necessarily needs to be done, look at a place like Lagos, where we sit today. There are estates in Lagos that have private companies providing 24/7 power to them.
True.
And they're paying, some of them are paying 16 naira per kilowatt hour, 17 naira per kilowatt hour, but they have 24/7 power.
Hours, yeah.
Now,
correct.
When NERC says that a disco can only charge, 30 naira per kilowatt hour, 32 naira per kilowatt hour, something like that, it is not a cost-reflective tariff. You should not be the one telling the disco what to charge. Now, we understand that you're trying to protect the customers from price gouging, but think about this for a second. You as a person, you run a generator in your house when there's no grid power. You're probably paying 100 naira or even more per kilowatt hour for that power you self-generate in your house. If a Genco working with the disco gives you power at 17 naira per kilowatt hour, you would happily take it. But because then you don't have to worry about the noise of your generator, the pollution, dealing with the dangers involved in you producing your own power. There are companies who are not even connected to the grid today because the power is stochastic. It's very, very epileptic. Now, think about this as well. If a Genco is talking to a disco and is providing power to that disco, and the disco is at liberty to sell the power at a price that makes sense, it is up to the individual or the companies to buy the power at the price that the company is providing the power at. And it should really be driven by competition. It should be up to the individual to buy. Power is not a social service. Just the same way your cell phone service is not a social service. It's up to you whether you want to recharge your cell phone or you don't. It's up to you. In the same way, it's up to people whether they want to turn on their lights or they don't. People need to learn power responsibility. You go to some houses and people leave their generator, leave their ACs. There are 5, 10 ACs in the house. There's no one in the house, maybe one person, and all of them are on. But they don't really care because they're not really paying a cost-reflective tariff.
Yes,
By
that's
the
what I
time
want
you
to
start
ask you.
paying-
Are you, let me butt in, just a brief one, let me butt in. Are you saying that electricity, it's not properly priced in Nigeria? Are you talking about, we're talking about cost-reflective tariff, but Nigerians want regular supply. So which do we get before which? Which comes first?
It's improperly priced. And, asking which comes first, chicken or the egg. So
Yeah.
there's a way you can look at this. We've done privatization. People expected that once privatization was finished, that we'll have power, 24/7 power immediately. That's not reality. Infrastructure needs to be developed. Infrastructure that exists already needs to be upgraded. New infrastructure needs to be put in place. The people doing this need to raise money. For them to raise money, they need to be able to show the people giving them the money that there will be return on investment, healthy return on investment. If you're talking about 15% return on investment, for example, the banks are not going to get out of bed. Investors, overseas investors are not going to get out of bed for that. When you talk about 20%, for example, as a minimum, then people are interested. However, they want to see that the entire value chain is connected, all the dots are connected, right? And for all the dots to be connected, the person producing the gas needs to know that they're selling that gas at a price that will secure their own investment in gas processing. The owner of the pipeline needs to be sure that the transport charges for the gas molecules moving to the pipeline are covered. So they need to charge whatever they need to charge to make their own money back. The GenCo needs to charge a price for the power that he delivers that covers the cost of building the generating plant. And so on and so forth, all the way to the DISCO that needs to make a vast investment to have the network function. So you see that all these dots must work for the whole sector to work. And what that means is when you add up all these dots, the price of the power that eventually gets to the end user has to be reflective of all the investment that has been made. See, we have the resources, we have the know-how. It's not a lack of know-how, it's not a lack of the resources.
Indeed,
Mr. It's lack of the enabling environment and enabling regulation and enforcement to make this happen.
I see that we need to continue this discussion. It's really getting very interesting. But that's what time can take now. Mr. Chukwu Eloka Umeh is the CEO Nest Oil Group. Thank you very much. Group CEO Nest Oil Group. Thank you very much for your time.